Today we're looking at lesson 2.08, Getting Down to Business. Today's objective is, given two functions, I can choose the one that grows fastest in 2 out of 2 problems. And here's some things to think about. How can math models help us make business decisions? And if we want to maximize growth, what features should we look for in a model? So we've talked about a few different kinds of functions. They grow in different ways at different rates. And what should we be looking for if we want to maximize growth? So today we're going to evaluate a business proposal. Let's talk numbers. Keep in mind, I can only count to 3. And this is going to be a word problem. And we're going to encounter word problems a lot on standardized tests and other kinds of tests. And I know that it's everybody's least favorite thing. So we're going to make a method to approach word problems in a way that maybe is a little bit less intimidating. We'll at least have a way to look at them and try to figure them out. So here's our approach. We're going to do 3 reads. We're going to read through the problem 3 times. And the first time, we're going to summarize it in our own words. We don't worry about the numbers. We don't worry about the details. We're just going to figure out conceptually, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to answer? And answer it not answer it, but just summarize it, restate it in our own words. Then we're going to read it a second time, and we're going to list out the numbers and the things those numbers represent. And then finally, we're going to read it a third time and suggest a place to start solving it. So here we go. Here is our story problem. First time, we're going to read and summarize. So you are a business investor, and you need to decide between 2 companies to buy, Calcu-rama or Computafest. Calcu-rama has a net income of $5 million last year, while Computafest had a net income of $2 million. The management of Calcu-rama develops a business plan for future growth that projects an increase in net income of $0.5 million per year, while the management of Computafest develops a plan aimed at increasing its net income by 15% each year. So pause the video and actually write down a summary. What is your own summary of what we need to do and what the general information is here? Don't need to worry about the specifics, just summarize what we're doing, what we know. So you may have said something like, we need to decide which business to buy. Or you may have said something about, we need to evaluate which one will make more money. You might have said something about a better investment. All of these are great answers. You may have said something else. You may have included some details. You may have noticed that there are different types of equations here, that these are different types of growth. You may have noticed that there's an arithmetic and a geometric in there. All of these are great answers and excellent things to notice on our first read-through of a story problem. So let's go on to our second read. Now we're going to focus on what are the relevant numbers and what do they represent. So here we go again. You're a business investor and you need to decide between 2 companies to buy, Calcu-rama or Computafest. Calcu-rama has a net income of $5 million last year, while Computafest had a net income of $2 million. The management of Calcu-rama develops a business plan for future growth that projects an increase in net income of $0.5 million per year, while the management of Computafest develops a plan aimed at increasing its net income by 15% each year. What are the relevant numbers and what do they represent? So go ahead and pause the video, write down what you think the relevant numbers are and a quick label for each of them. Come back and see if we match. So we're going to be comparing two different businesses, Calcu-rama, and let's do Computafest over here. Calcu-rama has a net income of $5 million last year. So 5 million seems like a relevant number. This was net income last year. And then Calcu-rama also has a business plan that says we're going to grow $0.5 million per year. So $0.5 million growth per year. On the other hand, we have Computafest, which had a net income of $2 million. Now, this term net income might be unfamiliar to you, so let's talk really briefly about what that means. Net income is the total amount of money a business made, or any entity brought in, subtract all the business expenses, so everything they spent. So the money made minus the expenses. That's going to be your net income. This is in contrast to the gross income, which is just the income and you ignore the expenses. Net income, you subtract out the expenses. So 2 million net income, we have subtracted out the expenses last year. And then Computafest has a plan we're going to increase by 15% each year. So let's do 15% growth each year. So now we just have one more read where we determine how we're going to start solving this problem. We have the numbers, we have a sort of overview of what we need to do. We just need a process now where we need to begin to start solving. So you are a business investor and you need to decide between two companies to buy, Calcu-rama or Computafest. Calcu-rama has a net income of $5 million last year, while Computafest had a net income of $2 million. The management of Calcu-rama develops a business plan for future growth that projects an increase in net income of $0.5 million per year, while the management of Computafest develops a plan aimed at increasing its net income by 15% each year. How might we start to solve this? So pause the video, write down a couple of ideas, and then come back and see if we do it the same way. And if you do it a different way, or if you want to start a different way, that's totally okay. So some of the tools we have for solving these include tables, graphs, equations, all of these things can help us model a mathematical progression over time. So maybe let's start with a table and go on from there. Tables tend to be our easiest entry point a lot of the time. But these other things, graphs and equations, might be helpful for us too. Before we get started on that, really quick, which one would you guess is a better investment? Why do you think? So we noticed one was arithmetic and one was geometric. One is growing by percentages, which would be multiplication. One is growing by addition. So which one do you think is going to grow more over time, over a long period of time? Which one might grow more over a short period of time? let's do some of these calculations and figure it out. So Calcu-rama was the one that started with 5 million and is going to grow 500,000, 0.5 million per year. Well, we can draw a table. Our input here would be years. Our output is going to be dollars. And I'm actually going to call this millions of dollars, just so I don't have to write a whole bunch of zeros and get a cramp in my hand. So we can list out the years, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We start with $5 million. We're going to grow by 0.5 each year. So we're going to add 0.5. I get 5.5. We'll add 0.5 again. You get 6. Goes up to 6.5 and 7 and 7.5 and so on. Now we could keep listing those out all the way out, but if we wanted to estimate at 20 years or at 30 years, that would take kind of a long time to write out. It'd be really annoying. And we used equations to make that process easier. So this is an arithmetic sequence. We're adding at each step. We know that our form for arithmetic is going to be mx plus b because it's linear. M is our value that we add each time. It's our common difference, so 0.5. B is our value at 0. So overall, our equation becomes f of x equals 0.5x plus 5. Now we could graph this by hand, but you know what other tool we have that's really handy is we have Desmos. So you can go over to Desmos, type this in, and just look at what equation comes out, what the graph looks like, and it ends up looking like a straight line. So Desmos is a really handy tool when we don't want to graph by hand. So let's model Computafest now. This is the one that started with $2 million. And they're going to grow by 15% each year. Once again, we can do a table, years and millions of dollars. And we'll list out our years. So we're going to start with $2 million on the first year. And we need to ask, what is our common ratio now? What do we multiply by at each step? Well, we had a shortcut with the percentages. We said when we have percentage growth, we're going to take 1 plus the percentage. We need to move the decimal point 2 places, 1, 2. So this is 1 plus 0.15. We get 1.15 as our common ratio. So we're going to take 2 times 1.15, and we get $2.3 million at year 1. We multiply by 1.15 again, and we get 2.645. I'll just round that to 2.65. We multiply by 1.15 again, and I get 3.04 when I round. Multiply again, I get 3.50. And one more time, I get 4.02 when I round. So you can see now at year 5, we're at $4 million. If we compare that to Calcu-rama, year 5 we had $7.5 million versus $4 million. So Calcu-rama at 5 years is definitely bigger than Computafest. Although Computafest is geometric, right? This is multiplying. This is geometric. So we might expect this one to start growing very rapidly at some point, but it might take a little bit of time. So maybe we can compare these on a graph and see when they match, see if one outgrows the other. But in order to do that in Desmos, we are going to need another equation here. So we know that our geometric form of an equation is a times b to the x. A is our value at 0, which is 2 in this case. B is our common ratio. We decided that was 1.15, what we multiply by each time. So overall here, our equation is 2 times 1.15 to the x. We can put this in Desmos again, and it will show an exponential function. Looks a little bit like that, a curve. So this is our graphs in Desmos. I just took a picture of them. Let's describe the differences in the two companies' plans. What do you notice here? Let's see, we can see that Calcu-rama is linear and Computafest is exponential. This one's linear. This one's exponential. We can see they cross at some point. We see that Calcu-rama starts out higher but ends lower. Over time. What else? You notice anything else about these? You might notice that they're both positive and increasing. You might say something about the rates. Calcu-rama is changing at the same rate the whole time, while Computafest is getting bigger faster. So Calcu-rama is changing at the same rate the whole time, and Computafest is growing faster all the time. So there's a bunch of things you could have noticed. You might have noticed other things. All those things you can notice on this graph are valid. So do you think these business plans are realistic? Why or why not? Would you believe them if these businesses came to you and were like, this is the model for our business and we expect you to believe it? Would you? Would you believe them? Well, one thing you might want to consider is how rapidly Computafest is growing. How long do you think that could go on? They're up to $30 million by 20 years. Do you expect that exponential growth to keep going forever, or do you suppose there's some place where it might hit a ceiling, where there just isn't any more market to be made? That could, of course, happen with Calcu-rama as well. They're just not growing quite as fast, so they might not get there as quickly. But at some point, these models might fail. Something we have to consider. Other things we can consider is that there are a lot of unknown variables here, a lot of things that could influence these business plans. We know that the economy can change, that things about personnel and hiring can change. We know that pandemics can cause problems in businesses. All of these things might introduce variability into these models. So these would probably need to be adjusted over time, if they're even good models in the first place. But we're going to assume, for now at least, that these are good models and try to make some decisions from them. So if you plan to sell the company after 5 years, which company do you think you should buy? Well, let's look at the graph at 5 years. We have 5 years down here. So Computafest has a point right here, and Calcu-rama has a point right here. Well, it looks like Calcu-rama will definitely be worth more. But also we can compare, we spent $5 million to buy the company, or we would have. So we can look at the change from when we bought it to when we're interested. It does look like Calcu-rama grew more and is worth more in general. So Calcu-rama is probably our best bet if we're going to sell after 5 years, if this is going to be a short-term company for us. But what if you plan to keep it at least 15 years? Does that change your answer? Well, let's look. Down here we have 15 years. We come up here on the graph. Look, Computafest is much higher now. Computafest has outgrown Calcu-rama. And you can see the change is even more because they started below Calcu-rama. So Computafest has gone all the way up to there. All that growth, where Calcu-rama has only done this much growth. So Computafest is a way better option at 15 years. So there is some question about how long you decide you want to hold this company for that's going to influence which one you buy. If it's a short-term company you want to sell, Calcu-rama probably. But if you want to keep it for a long time, we'll probably go with Computafest. When will the two companies have the same net income? At what point do they have the same? Well, it's going to be where they have the same Y value. It's going to be right there where they cross. So we'll just go down to our X value and see where that is in years. That's probably somewhere around 12 to 13 years. And it asks, will it ever happen again after that? Well, Calcu-rama is going at the same rate, and Computafest is increasing continuously. And so they are getting farther apart, measurably farther apart. And unless either of them actually changed their rate of change, if one of them got faster or slower, they will never come back together again because they're just getting farther apart. So with all of that information, which one are you going to choose? Do you want to choose Calcu-rama with its linear growth over time and its higher net income to begin with? We decided that one would be better short term. Or are you going to choose Computafest, which is a better long-term investment? This one's up to you. This is your answer. Which one do you choose? And that wraps up our objective for today. Given two functions, I can choose the one that grows fastest in 2 out of 2 problems. We can evaluate a business context and decide which one is better for our investment.